Recording progress.
So welcome everyone to Psalms for Life, where we explore a different chapter of Psalms with insights from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, as well as other sages and tzaddikim. And we want to thank Esther Ella Gurovich for sponsoring this series. It's quite an undertaking. It's week after week of a different chapter of Psalms each week, and may it be a source of merit for her, a source of blessing for her and her family. Okay, so today we are in Perek Yud Dalet, Psalm 14. And Psalm 14 is paired with Psalm 53. Okay, and these pairs are because Psalm 14 is the psalm that deals with the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash and the first exile to Babylon. And Psalm 53 deals with the second destruction and the second exile, the exile that we are still in. And both of these Psalms have some overlapping verses. Okay, so if you've never noticed it before, you can take a look and you'll see. Psalm 53 is a segula. Psalm 14 is a segula for a couple of things. First is so that people will listen to what you have to say. The other part of this is to be saved from people speaking negatively about you, speaking lashon hara about you, and to help you save yourself from doing the same thing to other people. So it really is about speech, and it's about paying attention to what people say. And this is quite interesting because we are talking about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash in this psalm, and people had, Yirmiyahu and other prophets had predicted all kinds of destructions, and people didn't pay attention to what they had to say. Okay, so because they didn't pay attention to what they had to say, they didn't heed the warnings. That's really sort of the nut of why this happened. Because if we pay attention to the warnings and we correct course, we're not going to run off a cliff, hopefully. Okay, God willing. So in this psalm, what we want to also keep in mind as we go through it is, and it's a very short chapter, is this idea that that the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of immorality and things like that, and the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, because of sinat chinam, which is sinat chinam is a baseless hatred. And so today, what we have, even though this is the second of these exiles, okay, and our final exile until the building of the third Holy Temple in Jerusalem, may it be soon and in our day. What we have is actually elements of both destructions, but the main overarching thing that we have to deal with today is sinat chinam, sinas chinam, totally baseless hatred. What is baseless hatred? Something to keep in mind. Baseless hatred is the hatred of any Jew. It's very simple. There's really not considered a reason to hate someone. Now, if someone has done some very severe crime or something like this, there are certain exceptions, but in general, we're not allowed to just hate someone. Okay, it's just against Torah. So we all have to try to love each other. And of course, we know that nothing brings the Jews closer together, unfortunately, than the outside world hating on us. And of course, we have a perfect example. I was informed yesterday about the comedian with a fake Jewish name who shall remain nameless, who basically said the Holocaust had nothing to do with Jews, nothing to do with race, and so on. This is an example of a kind of hatred that brings Jews together. Very sadly, that's what we need to bring us together. We all should be self-motivated to love one another. Okay. All right. So we will begin. Okay. Lam natseach leDavid. Amar Naval Bilibo. Ein Elokim hishpisu hisivu alila ein ose tov. So for the conductor of David, the fool, the Naval, or Naval in more modern Hebrew, but Naval, the fool said in his heart, there is no God. And they've become corrupt and committed despicable deeds, abominable deeds, and no one does good. Okay, so it's quite a mouthful, that verse. So what's going on here? So first of all, this psalm is directly alluding to Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Bavel, of Babylon, who took the Jews and brought them into captivity in Babylon for 70 years. Okay, he's the one who initiated this. And it's said that when he arrived at the first Beit HaMikdash, he violated it, he destroyed it. We'll go on a little bit more as we go further. And he's the Naval in this story. He's the fool. Other commentators say other people are the fool, but this is the mainly broadly accepted comment here. And who is the fool? The fool who in his heart says there's no God. Why in his heart? Why not with his lips? Because this is a deeper rejection of God. Okay, what we have in our hearts, we have feelings that are like thoughts. Okay, and these feelings are very important. And these feelings represent the deepest aspect of ourselves, which is why in Judaism, what we want to do is align our hearts with our head, bring these two elements, the intellect and the feelings, into alignment so that we can come closer to Hashem with both aspects of us, our intellect, our thoughts, and our feelings. But a fool has this feeling of rejection of God baseline. That's his rejection. There's no God. And this fool deals corruptly, and he commits abominations and so on. Now, this word Naval can also mean not only a fool, but as Rav Hirsch says, somebody who's withered and worn out, somebody who's really shriveled up. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a big, powerful king. How was he shriveled up? Because if we're not infused with godliness in our lives, we don't have that vivacity. We don't have that chiyus. We don't have that vitality. God gives us vitality. That's why we say the Torah, right? The Torah is like water. The Torah waters us. It nourishes us. It helps us flourish. And of course, the Torah and Hashem are one. So the fool is somebody who's shriveled up and dried out, desiccated. Rav Hirsch says withered. Okay. Now, Rebbe Nachman has a unique understanding, two unique understandings of this idea of the fool, the Naval. Okay. And I'd like to share it with you. And again, this is from the wonderful book. It's The Power of Psalms published by the Breslov Research Institute, and the commentaries by Rabbi David Sears. And I highly recommend this book if you like to read commentary. So the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And we understand that here the fool refers to Nebuchadnezzar. In Psalm 53, it refers to Titus, the Roman general who destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash. And David Sears lets us know that Rebbe Nachman finds the word Naval in other Torah verses, and he gives it a unique interpretation, a Naval interpretation, novel, okay, pun intended. And the idea is that the word refers to someone that is free of any sophistication, any pseudo sophistication, any pretension. A Naval is a fool who actually yearns to be close to Hashem. So we know when we read the Psalms, as we've been discussing for the past 15 meetings here, we know we're supposed to find ourselves in the Psalm. This is really how we invoke change, spiritual change. This is one of the ways, is praying the words of Tehillim. And when we look in here and we see this word Naval, the fool said in his heart, there is no God, we can understand that in relationship to ourselves. When we throw away our sophistication, okay, and our pseudo wisdoms and our pretensions and our, all of that stuff, that's where we can tap into that power, the good power of the fool. That's where we are not atheists. That's where our love for Hashem and our blessing for Hashem continues. And I am actually taking what Rabbi Sears is saying and running with it a little bit, because that's how I read this psalm. And the idea is that the Jews were the nation that had received the Torah, but they didn't act wisely. What did they do when they received the Torah? The golden calf, okay? But Rebbe Nachman explains that the Jews received the Torah because they didn't act wisely, okay? That's why we need the Torah, to help us shape up, to give us wisdom. What is wisdom, okay? So in this context, let's call wisdom Da'at, okay, Das. This idea of holy awareness of God at all times. That's what we want to bring into our hearts. Whether we have a drop of Torah learning or whether someone's a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, okay, that's irrelevant in this context. The idea is to take what we do know and bring it down into our hearts. Turn our intellect into our feelings. Join them, make them one. And that is how we develop emunah, faith. That is how we develop bitachon, trust in God. And that's the expression of Da'at, okay? So anyway, if we want to have this connection, okay, we throw away all the pseudo stuff and we just connect to Hashem with innocence and with simplicity. And for those of you who want a wonderful story about this, I think somebody mentioned it last week in class, the sophisticate and the simpleton in the Chacham and the Tom in Rabbi Nachman's stories. I encourage you all to read it. It is delightful. And I encourage you to read it out loud to family maybe, or even read it out loud to yourself. Okay, we will continue. My notes. Okay. Oh, also, Rabbi Hirsch also says that that we should pay attention to the tenses in this song, and that's something also to keep in mind, because the tenses, I just want to find the notes, give us clues to what's going on. So verse 1 through 5 are written in the past tense, and that's David HaMelech, King David speaking in the past tense. And verses 6 and 7 use the future tense. And that gives us an additional insight that this psalm is very relevant today. Okay, and as we read on, we'll take a look at the words and we'll understand why. Okay, we still have a little bit of time. Okay. Oh, okay, and let me continue with verse 2. Hashem mishamayim hishkif al b'nei Adam liros hayesh maskil doresh es Elokim. the Lord in heaven looked down on the sons of men to see whether there is a man of understanding. Maskil is not just understanding, it's of intellect, who thinks about things, who analyzes. Someone who, the next part of that verse is, who seeks the Lord. In other words, we have to also seek Hashem with our intellect. Okay, it's not just enough the feelings. We've got to have both. And so here, the word specifically used by David HaMelech is maskil, which is someone who is going to analyze and look into this idea. And so who seeks Hashem? Hashem's looking down to see who's looking for me. Okay, who wants me? Who's looking for me? If you're looking for Hashem, you're already on the right trail. Okay, why are you on the right trail if you're looking for Hashem versus someone who's not looking for Hashem? There are people who struggle, okay, who struggle to find Hashem. Religious people who struggle to have that connection. Okay, so why is that valuable in and of itself? Because someone who doesn't look for Hashem throughout his life and in his life and doesn't seek a connection, that person has basically said life is a free-for-all and whatever I do doesn't matter. Okay, and I'm not just talking about morals and things like this. This person is saying, in essence, even though it's arrogant to not look for Hashem, even though it's arrogant to say, I am everything, he's saying really he doesn't count. Because without Hashem, there's no afterlife. And there's only this very fleeting temporal existence. Okay. And this fleeting temporal existence, once it's over, it's over. Okay, maybe your name lives on, but so what? Okay. But it's the soul that counts. So the person who isn't a maskil, who isn't smart, doesn't look for Hashem. The person who doesn't want to find Hashem has kind of given up, not only on Hashem, but interestingly enough, on himself. He may be arrogant, he may be a narcissist, he may be a power-hungry person, but he's still given up on his genuine, true value. He doesn't appreciate the fact that Hashem gave him his soul, his neshama. Okay, let's continue. It is better when I type my notes, by the way, it's much more legible to try to do that in the future. Okay, so Hashem is looking down to see if anybody's looking for him, and he's dismayed. Nobody's looking for him. What does verse 3 say? Hakol sar yachdav ne'elahu ein ose tov, ein gam echad. They've all turned away. They've turned their backs. Together, they've spoiled everything. They're not one of them does good, not even one. They've all turned their backs, are not looking for Hashem. Even if Hashem comes and taps them on the shoulder, they don't want to know. Okay, so it's not just a lack of intellect. It's not just giving up on oneself, but it's more. They've turned away. We are not going to pay any attention to Hashem. Now, we all know stories of people who've had miraculous salvations in their life, and it has brought them closer to Hashem. I know many stories like this. I could look at my own life. Whenever we have even if it's not a miracle, but we have a salvation. Oh, thank you, Hashem. I feel so close to you. And then we know stories of people who in the moment said, oh, now I believe. And then 5 minutes later, 5 days later, 5 weeks later, it's as if Hashem has never tapped them on the shoulder. They have turned away. They have made a choice to turn away. Okay, this is why it's so important. Excuse me 1 minute. This is why it's so important to make Kibbutz every day. To keep Hashem in our minds, to keep Hashem in our hearts, to have a conversation with him, to keep him on our lips, and to discuss ourselves with Hashem. Every time we discuss ourselves with Hashem and our lives with Hashem, we confide in Hashem. He's our therapist, he's our best friend, he's our father, he's our king. Every time we do this, we are further cementing that relationship and that awareness, okay? We are turning to Hashem, not away, chas v'shalom. Okay, let's continue. Halo yadu kol poale aven ochle ami achlu lechem Hashem lo kara'im. So didn't all those busy with, those workers of iniquity, okay, they're evildoers, didn't all those people know? Who were those people, those evildoers, those workers of iniquity? They were the ones who devoured my people. The my is capitalized because that's Hashem saying that. They partook of a feast. They did not call upon Hashem. So what is this, devoured my people? So we're told a few things. We're told in various commentaries that the nations devour the Jewish people, okay? The thing that can lead to this from our end is this sinat chinam, this sinas chinam, this baseless hatred. That's something between us that can lead the nations to that. But of course, it's on them for doing it. And here it's also talking about when Nebuchadnezzar came to the Beit Hamidash, the first Beit Hamidash. So it says that he destroyed it, he raided it, he took the vessels from the temple, and devoured is referring to two things. One thought is that he actually ate the Lechem panim, the showbreads. He took them off the shulchan in the Mishkan and he ate them. And we just learned about this yesterday in the Parsha, all about the showbreads. So if you want to go check, I haven't posted on YouTube yet. I'll be posting that video, but of course you could just go pick up your Chumash and look for the Rashi and look for the other commentaries on these showbreads. This is a very big violation, okay? Nebuchadnezzar wasn't exactly an atheist. I mean, he believed that there was a God of the Jewish people, and he wasn't even persecuting the Jews for their religion per se. It was more of a political persecution at that time. He was an agent of a religious situation, a religious destruction, but he himself, there's a question about whether he was actually a real anti-Semite or whether this was for politics and power, because the Jews had some power at that time. The other reference here is to the feast which took place in Babel. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about this piece of history, and it's fascinating. I encourage you to read about it. So the Jews were brought to Babel. The temple was destroyed. The Jews were brought to Babel. We know that our Talmud, the main Talmud we use today, is the Babylonian Talmud. Talmud Bavli. That's the Talmud people refer to today. However, there is the Talmud Yerushalmi that was at that time assembled in Israel, okay, the Jerusalem Talmud. But the main one everybody uses is the Bavli. It's said to contain greater wisdom in many areas. So exile for the Jews, sometimes it hones us, okay, as there's an expression that a Jew is like an olive, you squeeze them and the best part comes out. Of course, the olive oil is the best part of the olive. Okay, so anyway, there was this lavish feast. And the lavish feast that we're speaking of is Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, Balshazzar. And Balshazzar had a feast, and what he did was something amazing and revolting, amazing. He decided to show his hatred for Hashem by drinking from the holy kalim, okay, the holy vessels that his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken from the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, he knew they were holy. He was spitting in Hashem's face, so to speak. Suddenly, this is a very famous passage in the Tanakh. I think it's in Daniel. Suddenly, a hand appeared and wrote on the wall. This is where we get that expression, oh, he didn't look at the writing on the wall. Okay, that's where it comes from. Many tekel ufarsin. That's the 4 words that were on the wall. And these words were written unusually, whether it was Aramaic or not, I don't know. They were written in an unusual form, and nobody could decipher them except Daniel, our prophet Daniel. And he said the words means as follows: Mene, mene, Hashem has counted the day of Balshazzar's kingdom, and they are numbered. Tekel, Hashem has weighed Balshazzar on the scales of justice and found him guilty. And Ufarsin, his kingdom will be broken up and given to Persia and Media. That night, Balshazzar was killed, and the Babylonian Empire was no more. So that is also alluded to in the psalm, that feast, that corrupt feast, feasting on the Jews, feasting on the Lechem Panim, the Showbreads from the Beis Hamidash by Nebuchadnezzar, and feasting on using the vessels of the Beit Hamidash. Can you imagine? He knew that they were holy. He knew what they were. Okay, and of course, this psalm can also be interpreted or seen as having an allusion to Purim, which is coming up. And we are in Adar. Rosh Chodesh Adar is today. It's Adar 1. It's the first month of Adar, the first day of Adar today. So Chodesh Tov, everyone. So this idea is that these feasts, these takedowns of our enemies happen again and again. Okay, let's continue. Okay. Oh, also, Rebbe Nachman, this is also important, compares the evil ones to school teachers who don't do their job. Okay, I don't necessarily have time now to go into all the details. I encourage you to get the Power Psalms, the Breslov Research Institute version. But to sum it up, a school teacher who isn't protecting the purity of the child and giving over what they need to know to live a life in which they walk together with Hashem, they're close to Hashem, they align with Hashem, they serve Hashem, that school teacher is considered one of these evildoers, one of these wicked people, okay? And also, there's a hint to the idea of, because it mentions the feast and the evildoers in the same verse, of this idea that people who don't appreciate their feasts, literally their food, they don't say a blessing. They don't appreciate where their food's coming from. We don't say a blessing over our food. It's like we're ignoring Hashem. That also is a reference, an allusion to this, says Rebbe Nachman. Okay. Verse 5. Okay. Let me see. Sham pachadu pachad ki Elokim bedor tzadik. There they were in great fear, because Hashem is in the generation of a righteous man. Okay. So after this whole event, the people who were afraid were the evildoers. Okay. In this case, we're talking about Balshazzar and Babylonian Empire and so on, and then Persia and Media. Okay, but we're also talking about today as well. And now, if we remember that the last 2 verses are in the future tense, we'll pull this together. Atzas ani savishu ki Hashem machsehu. You put to shame the counsel of the poor. Okay, you put to shame the plans of the poor. Why? Because Hashem is his refuge. You actually dislike the poor because they cling to their Bibles. Okay, well, I'm not going to say the first part of that famous quote. You know, we cling to Hashem. That's why people hate people. That's why people hate Jews who cling to Hashem. Because we cling to Hashem. That's another reason for the hatred. Our own sinas chenem, and the fact that we're clinging to Hashem, it's like triggers the evildoers. Look, they're relying on Hashem. I have said Hashem doesn't count. I've turned away from Hashem. I've turned my back on him. And look at those people. They're relying on him. Wow, I don't like them. That's what King David's saying here. And finally, verse 7, Mi ten mitzion Yeshuas Yisrael, Beshuv Hashem Shavus Amo Yagel, Yaakov Yismach Yisrael. Oh, that the salvation of Israel would come out of Zion, out of Zion. When Hashem returns the captivity of his people, Yaakov shall rejoice and Yisrael shall be glad. And of course, that's a very famous verse. And the idea is here, and I do want to briefly explain this, is that it's referring to today's exile. We are asking, we are praying that very soon we will be taken, and the salvation will come from where? From Zion, from Zion, okay? And we will be able to rejoice. And this idea is so interesting because this idea of return, shivus, okay, shivus amma, when the people will Bishuv Hashem Shivus Amu. Okay, when the people will be returned by Hashem, will return their captivity, will be returned, also can refer to our Yishuv Hadas. Our peace of mind will return at that point as well. And we can sort of get into this Geula consciousness, the idea of living in the redemption now by working on what Rabbi Nachman always tells us to work on, our Yishuv Hadas, our peace of mind, a calm mind, a restful mind. How do we do that? Well, first, we have to have some joy. We have to bring about some joy. This is the perfect month to do that. That joyful energy is in the air. All we have to do is grab for it, okay, and do whatever it takes to be joyful. The joy gives us peace of mind, says Rabbi Nachman, and so does our faith and trust in God. When we rely on Hashem for our salvations, we don't worry. When we rely on doctors, politicians, whatever else, we rely on people for salvations, we're going to be let down. But when we rely on Hashem, we can throw everything on Hashem. And even if it doesn't turn out the way we want, at least we'll have this consciousness that's from Hashem. It's from Hashem also. It must be for our good, even if it's a bit of a struggle. We don't want any more struggles. We really want the Geula now. We want to experience that freedom. We want to experience that closeness to Hashem, that glory of Hashem. We want to greet the Mashiach, put the crown on his head, and please God, it should be soon in our time. Okay. So, anyway, we have finished chapter 14, and we are going to go to our recital of Tehillim. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say all the segulas for today's Psalms. It's the first day of the month, so it's Psalms 1 through 9, chapters 1 through 9. Apparently, I'm looking at a question here. I answered Naomi's question. Did that not realizing I did, but that's good. And I'm going to pause the recording so that we can say Tehillim. Hold on one moment.
Recording progress.
So everyone, please continue saying those Tehillim. I hope you kept the names in mind that Suzanne put up there. And I want to thank Esther Alagorovich again for making this shiur possible. It should be a source of bracha and hatzlacha for her and her family. Also, we have a lot of exciting programs coming up in February. It is February today. And if you go to BreslovWoman.org, you can see the new schedule, the new calendar there. I want to wish you all a very, very good week and Chodesh Tov. And I'm going to end now, but please continue saying the Psalms if you're saying them.